I'm going to save you tons of money, right? I'm going to save you tons of money. What she will give as a solution to literally every single one of your problems is, the reason you feel this way is sexism. The reason you're having this challenge is the patriarchy and oppression. The reason that you're like, it's just such a juvenile, but as an LDS woman, I think it's a fair discussion to have about a lot of the online LDS coaches that are out there. And I think it's fair to start asking and discerning between who's the best and who's the worst. And maybe there are some that we should stay away from. Hi guys, my name is Rachel. Welcome to my channel. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I cover a lot of LDS topics, doctrine. Today I'm going to be covering a little more of a pop culture-y topic. There's a pretty saturated culture of LDS influencers, and recently, maybe since 2020, there's been a shift towards LDS online life coaching and therapy. And today I'm going to be breaking down the best to worst of 5 of the top LDS therapists / life coaches online. So I really do understand and empathize with the challenge that women in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints face trying to confront challenges of modernization, of modernism, of relationships. That is totally, totally normal. But if you're going to give your faith, your relationships, your mental health to someone, you want to make sure that you're giving that to the right people. And I think it's perfectly normal to recognize that there are things that the church gives us principles, and there are spaces where we probably need to look for outside help. A perfect example of that for me would be, they gave us the word of wisdom, and those are the principles that we want to aspire to fulfill. But it's not like they provide you personal trainers or nutritionists. So there was a time in my life where I felt like I needed to hire a life coach to help me with nutrition and a personal trainer to help me to get in shape. So it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, I want a little outside help in these areas of my life. The question that we need to ask, though, is who are the best people to pay our money to and give our time to. And I will spill the tea right now ahead. I think Julie Hanks is probably the worst of the 4 or 5 that I'm going to evaluate. The Psychological Care Institute published a study in which they articulate their concerns about what is known as pop psychology. And in this article, they talk about how pop psychology, and the problem with pop psychology is that it sells quick fixes for mental health. And they warn that oversimplified solutions for very complicated emotional problems are misleading and can harm people. And they also warned that social media amplifies pop psychology. Influencers oversimplify psychological concepts to engage their audience and often lead to misconceptions about promoting pseudoscience. I think Julie Hanks probably articulates and expresses this problem with pop psychology masquerading as actual therapy more than anyone in the LDS online coaching space. And to show that I don't have a total prejudice against her, I'm going to be evaluating 3 or 4 other LDS online life coaches who offer similar services, who I think would be a much better place to put your money. The main categories that I'm going to be evaluating, these 4 online life coaches who are LDS and have different offerings online, and some of them are therapists, are going to be, do they represent themselves as in their credentials honestly? Do they represent their relationship with the church honestly? And if they have publications or work, is that easy to access? And finally, what is the level of sophistication and the kind of, what is the level of sophistication of the actual therapy that they offer? Because they are claiming that they can help you with some pretty complicated, I mean, if someone is saying they can help you with your marriage, that's a pretty complicated task, and it should warrant a complicated solution. And that's where pop psychology is such a problem, and why these psychological institutes for care are warning that you need to be careful with people who are selling one-size-fits-all answers to some really personal and complicated solutions, and that it's important to remember that coaching isn't therapy. So I'm going to be evaluating from best to worst. I mean, if you have suggestions as well, I'm totally open to evaluating other LDS life coaches, LDS therapists that you want me to look at. I'm totally fine with that. These are just the most popular that I can see right now. I'm going to be evaluating from best to worst. I'm not giving a secret. You don't have to watch to the end. If you want to see why, you can scroll to the end. Dr. Erica Finlayson-Fife gets number 1. Dr. Jody Moore, I'm sorry, Coach Jody Moore gets 2. Natalie Clay, who is a relationship coach expert, gets 3. And Dr. Julie Hanks gets last place for a lot of reasons. Okay, so the number 1 reason that I really appreciate Dr. Finlayson-Fife, and you should know that I have no relationship with any of these people. One of the reasons I really appreciate Dr. Finlayson-Fife is that she's very clear at the get-go that she's offering online coaching. She is a doctor and she publishes her thesis. It took me seconds to find her published research, and she has some very sophisticated, nuanced solutions for relationships, for marriage. She represents herself very clearly as a professional offering coaching advice, and she makes it very clear that she's not offering therapy, even though she's a doctor. She's saying these are courses that I offer, they've been reviewed, but this isn't therapy. She makes her research very easy to find. And then she also, one thing I noticed on her website was that a lot of her blog posts have religious, like she'll reference a kind of a devotional with references to the scriptures, which is kind of indicates that she has a more positive relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I also had her recommended to me by a friend. I guess this would be my 5th category of evaluation, is who recommended me to this counselor or to this life coach that is LDS in nature, and does that person have a strong testimony? And one of the strongest women that I know in the church that I would go to for advice recommended her to me in her Art of Desire course. She said was really helpful for her to navigate midlife crises and making decisions about her life. She's definitely on the more expensive side, but I would kind of say that that's a little more honest. If you're asking for solutions to complicated situations, you kind of get what you pay for a little more. I've also heard several men say that the relationship, your sexual intimacy course in marriage was really, really helpful for her. So I came into this with kind of a blank preconception about these different women, was expecting to be disappointed. And I know that Dr. Finlayson might have some controversial takes on certain aspects of sexuality, but I have never heard her encourage anyone to do anything that would cause them to break their covenants. I left with a lot of respect for what she's offering, what she's trying to do. I do think she's really trying to elevate and help relationships in the LDS community from an LDS perspective. And she has a degree of respect for how complicated relationships are, marriages, sexual intimacy. And so I really appreciate that she brings a level of respect to the complicated issue. And this is the furthest, this is really, I really do think that she's doing good in our community. And I would recommend her, especially because it was also recommended to me by women who have very strong testimonies, and since taking her courses have seen an improvement in their relationships and have not had any kind of religious faith crisis as a result of going to her. The second person that I am going to evaluate is Jody Moore. Now, Jody Moore represents herself perfectly clearly. The name of her company is Jody Moore Coaching on Instagram, online. And she's very clear. I mean, she doesn't have a psychology degree or a clinical degree, so there isn't a blurring of what she's offering. She's very clear from the get-go, and in a lot of ways she she has to make a case for coaching versus therapy because she's just offering coaching. Her relationship with the church as a member of the church is quite positive. I think she's honest about some of her questions. She's featured several guests that on her podcast that talk to this question of faith transition. And I have to disclose that I have paid for her online services before. So she's the only one of these four that I've actually paid for. And what I saw in her coaching was that she never tells people what to do. She just kind of takes the emotionality out of someone's faith concerns and lets them get clear on what they're thinking and what their concerns are. I also would say with the previous two women that I read on Reddit, which I actually really appreciated, is that both Dr. Finlayson-Fife and Jody Moore have been invited to participate in more anti-Mormon YouTube panels and things like that. And they haven't said no, but they've just avoided it. So I appreciate that. That signals to me that they are striving to have a degree of respect in their rhetoric and their discussions about the church, even though they may have their own questions. Everyone's allowed to have their own faith journey. I appreciate that both of those women have avoided participating with anti-Mormon types or people who are just, if you're going to kind of market yourself as an LDS coach, you should probably have a solid relationship with the gospel. It doesn't have to be perfect. We all have an ongoing journey, but I think that they are honest and solid in their relationship enough that they are avoiding participating in anti-Mormon online forums. And that's something I read on Reddit that people have observed about both of them. Okay, the third person that I really, really like goes more into the category of relationships, and that's Natalie Clay, and she is Jody Moore's sister, and I cannot recommend her marriage podcast enough. Her marriage podcast is really, really helpful. It's very concrete. I would say if you are not able to get proper marital therapy, her podcast is a really helpful framework. It's a very empowering framework. She is extremely expensive for personalized coaching and group coaching at this point. I would say her offerings are more elite, like a lot. You basically, if you're on the verge of a marriage crisis, if I was on the verge of a marriage crisis, I could see myself short of going to a therapist, or if therapy wasn't working, I would probably go to her. So I really do like Natalie Clay. She has been very honest representing herself as a coach, not a therapist. She's been very honest and clear about her relationship with the church. She's been honest and clear about her relationship with her spouse. Okay, so the fourth person that I evaluated, who's a very prominent online personality, is Julie Hanks. And one of the reasons that she gets such a low ranking in my metric is that she doesn't represent herself very honestly. She has a trademark Dr. Julie Hanks podcasts, Ask Dr. Julie Hanks, and she puts that everywhere she's speaking to kind of infer that she's offering therapy. And you can see that people are confused online when you look at the comments on her Instagram, that a lot of women there clearly think they're getting therapy from her. It makes it very hard to find that she's offering therapy. If you go to her website on the About page and you scroll down, she says, oh, if you want therapy from me, you can make an appointment at my Utah Wasatch Therapy Clinic. But unless you're really looking for that information, it's not clear that she's not offering therapy. The second reason that I really, really would dissuade, I've considered starting a GoFundMe account for women to cancel their subscription with her and go to literally any other LDS online therapist or online coach than her, because her solutions, like, I'm going to give away her secret sauce right now. I'm spilling the tea on her diagnosis for literally every problem, whether it's in her podcasts, whether it's in her courses. Her diagnosis, or she's not diagnosing, right? And she does say that on her website. She's like, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not giving advice, and yet she does give advice everywhere. Her entire this is the whole point of what pop psychology is warning us against, is they're warning us against oversimplified solutions for very complicated dilemmas. Her very simplified one size fits all solution is sexism and oppressive patriarchy. That is her solution for every reason you're having a problem. Oh, you're having a problem in your marriage? Take my course, my $55 course, and free yourself from the oppression of a patriarchal marriage. Oh, you're having a faith crisis? Come take my course on faith transitions and learn why the prophets, and by the way, she never says the words prophets and apostles. She only uses the word church leaders, which is another reason why I think she gets such a low ranking in my assessment, is that I don't think that she's been very honest about her relationship with the gospel. I think she is a member. Obviously, she's a member, but I don't think that she has a testimony of the gospel. I actually think when you look at the words that she says, I actually think she aligns much more with anti-Mormon rhetoric than with pro-Mormon rhetoric. And she does market herself to LDS women. 80% of the titles in her podcast say the word church or church culture. She's clearly addressing an LDS audience. And most of her blog posts are the same. A lot of her books that she's published there's 3 books she's published are to a predominantly LDS audience. So she is marketing herself in a kind of foggy way, like she's not quite clear. She's trademarked the term Dr. Julie Hanks on everything. So she's inferring therapy. She's, she talks about the church and she says she's a member. So she's kind of inferring, hey, trust me with your faith transition, when most of what she says aligns with anti-Mormon rhetoric. And then finally, the final nail in the coffin was when I actually looked at her resume, and I found that she has enormous amount of expertise in online social media marketing. It's like an entire section of her CV is online marketing. And I realized, oh, her expertise isn't actually therapy. Because if you read her dissertations, they're not that sophisticated. They're not that complicated. Her dissertation and her whole shame aspiration thing is basically, she felt ashamed that she wanted to be ambitious in her career. And so she wrote a thesis about how to restructure families so that women don't feel shame pursuing a career. That's essentially the title of her. And by the way, it is incredibly hard to get a hold of her dissertation. Shouldn't be this hard for me to get a hold of her research. I had to order it. It's very hard. I've had a career. Most of my friends are LDS and they have careers or they've pursued degrees. We didn't all necessarily feel shame about it. We just had to figure it out on our own. And her solutions to these very complicated challenges, like faith transition, like marriage challenges, are these very cheap. This is basically bootleg Botox, where you just don't know what you're getting. This is McDonald's pop psychology, like coaching that she's giving. And that's why I'm going to save you tons of money, right? I'm going to save you tons of money. Save yourself some money. Because what she will give as a solution to literally every single one of your problems is, the reason you feel this way is sexism. The reason you're having this challenge is the patriarchy and oppression. The reason that you're like, it's just such a juvenile, honestly, it's such a juvenile take on feminism that it's almost an insult to feminism. It's not sophisticated at all. She epitomizes pop psychology. And that's why I really, really think it's important to open up the discussion about all of these different online offerings that are available to LDS women. Start an open conversation about it, look into their backgrounds and say who's presenting themselves honestly, who is getting good results. And what I have noticed from Dr. Julie Hanks and her customers is that most of the women that I know who really love her and listen to her have had marriage crises and faith crises that have never resolved. They just remain confused. And that's because if someone hands you a paradigm and says, oh, the reason that you're confused about the church and your marriage is because you're trapped in an oppressive situation. You're kind of handcuffed. You feel paralyzed. Because if you're just stuck in a stagnant, paralyzed, structured situation, whether it's marriage or the church, your only option is to leave or to try to change that person. And that's what her marriage courses are basically is. Her marriage courses are basically how to change your husband to not be an oppressive patriarchal man. That's what so many of her podcasts about the church are, is how do we change the church to stop them from being oppressive patriarchal men? It's not, no. Maybe your faith questions are legitimate and maybe you have good questions. It's never nuanced. That's what's so funny about her clips where she says, I'm trying to get people out of black and white thinking, because her answers to complicated situations and complicated questions are so black and white. For her, everything is a very juvenile sexism. Everything is sexist. Like for Julie Hanks, everything is sexist. And I just want to be clear, like I've worked a very long career in a very male-dominated environment, and sexism does exist, but it's very isolated and it should be dealt with. The one incident that I really had was that a man was saying vulgar sexual jokes at work repetitively, and he lost his job, but men were also on board with eradicating this sexism from the workplace. That is sexism, but labeling something that you don't like as sexism is not a good approach to analyzing life, right? And in Julie Hanks' pop psychology world, everything she doesn't like is oppression by the patriarchy and sexism. Like I said, it's a very middle school, juvenile take on feminism. It's a very middle school, juvenile take on psychology. And frankly, I think where she excels, where she's probably the best in the biz is, and you can look at her resume, which I will link below. She is excellent at online social marketing. She's excellent at communicating. She's also, one thing that we haven't talked about is the way that we will honestly ignore people when they have kind of pretty privilege, is that she's very pretty and she's very likable. She's super likable. And honestly, A+ for her, the way she interacts with even critics online. She's very classy. And I think that's one reason why people haven't dug deeper into what she's offering and her background and haven't unearthed some of the red flags here, is that she is very pretty and she is very likable. But that doesn't change the fact that she's been pretty disingenuous about the way she markets herself and presents herself. And on the underbelly of it, her coaching and what she's actually offering isn't very good. It's pop psychology at its worst. And one of the reasons that these psychological care institutes are so concerned is that pop psychology can harm people. If you are being given a paradigm that is very oversimplified for some very complicated personal issues that you have, it could cause harm in your life. So I would love to know if you have any other online LDS coaches that you want me to evaluate. I'm happy to look at them. I will be using the same rubric of, do they present themselves honestly? Can we find their research? Who recommended them to you? If you hated this video and you love Julie Hanks, can you please leave a comment below as to if you are a woman, why you love her, and also if you are an active member of the church still, because I have a suspicion that you probably are not. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm sure this is going to spark a lot of discussion, but as an LDS woman, I think it's a fair discussion to have about a lot of the online LDS coaches that are out there. And I think it's fair to start asking and discerning between who's the best and who's the worst. And maybe there are some that we should stay away from. Not every athlete is good at sports, and not every coach is good at coaching, right? So anyway, thanks for being with me, you guys. And thanks for just all the support you guys have given me over the years. You're awesome. Bye.